Ethan sat at the bar sipping his drink, trying to ignore the hum of voices around him. It was a quiet night at the Sci-Fi Vault, a bar he often visited. The neon lights flickered above, casting strange, colorful shadows on the walls. The usual crowd filled the space, a mix of humans and alien visitors, but tonight something felt different. He wasn't sure why, but something about the woman standing at the far end of the bar caught his attention. She wasn't like the others. She stood tall, with long, dark hair that shimmered like the night sky, and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. She wore a sleek black dress, the kind that seemed out of place in a casual bar. Her presence was like a shadow, quiet but powerful, like she belonged to another world. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Curious. He had seen plenty of strange people here before, but she was different. There was something otherworldly about her. He leaned back in his chair, thinking of a way to get closer to her. After a moment, he smiled. He wasn't afraid of a challenge. In fact, he loved them. He walked up to the bar, casually sitting next to her. He ordered another drink but kept his eyes on her. The woman didn't seem to notice at first, but as Ethan sat there, he couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she carried herself, like she had been here before, like she owned the place. He finally decided to speak. "Hey," he said with a grin. "You come here often?" The woman glanced at him, her eyes sharp and calculating. Ethan didn't flinch. He was used to being the one in control of conversations. She gave him a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been around," she replied softly, her voice smooth like velvet. Ethan leaned forward. "What's your name?" "Selene," she said, her gaze never leaving him. "And you are?" "Ethan," he replied, still grinning. He had a knack for making people feel comfortable, and this woman seemed like she could use some comfort. But something about her made him curious. He couldn't quite figure her out. A moment of silence passed between them. Then, as if she was reading his mind, Selene spoke again. "You're not from here, are you?" Ethan laughed. "No, I'm human, just visiting." Her lips twitched slightly, like she was amused by something only she knew. "I can tell." There was a pause, and then she tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "You're not afraid of me?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Should I be?" Selene's smile turned mischievous. "Maybe. Most people would be." Ethan leaned back in his chair, intrigued but not backing down. "You know, I've heard stories about people like you," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "Vampires, right?" The moment the word left his mouth, Selene's expression changed. For just a second, her eyes flickered, something dark and dangerous behind them. But it was gone before he could even blink. "You've heard stories," she said, her voice soft but chilling. "What makes you so sure I'm one of them?" Ethan grinned. "I'm a man of challenges. I like to take bets. So here's one for you." Selene raised an eyebrow. "A bet?" "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice full of confidence. "How about you go on a date? With me? No tricks, no games, just a simple dinner. And if you can prove that you're as dangerous as you say, I'll give you whatever you want." "Anything." Selene studied him for a long moment, her eyes never leaving his face. She didn't smile this time. Instead, she looked almost impressed. "And if I don't win?" she asked, her voice smooth but dangerous. Ethan leaned closer, his grin widening. "If you don't win, you walk away. No harm, no foul." There was a long pause. For a moment, Selene didn't say anything, and Ethan thought she might turn him down. But then, without warning, she nodded slowly. "All right, Ethan," she said, her voice low and filled with something he couldn't quite place. "I accept your wager." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. But now the game was on. They made the plans quickly. Dinner at a high-end restaurant in the city, a place known for its exclusive clientele. Ethan tried to keep his excitement in check, but he couldn't help the thrill that ran through him. This was going to be interesting. As he left the bar later that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a deal with someone who was more than just a woman. Celine had a strange power about her, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't sure if he was in control of the situation. He wasn't afraid of her, but part of him wondered, should he be? Ethan stood outside the restaurant staring up at the towering building. The lights around it glittered like a million stars, and the glass windows reflected the busy city streets. He ran his fingers through, his hair trying to calm his nerves. This was it. The night of the wager. He wasn't nervous, of course. Ethan never got nervous. But there was something different about tonight. Something about Celine had gotten under his skin. She wasn't just another challenge, another bet. She was something else entirely. He checked his watch, then pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The host greeted him with a warm smile, but Ethan barely noticed. His eyes scanned the room, looking for Celine. The atmosphere was luxurious, filled with softly murmured conversations and clinking glasses, but the moment his gaze landed on her, everything else seemed to fade away. She was sitting at a table by the window, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes scanning the menu with an air of quiet elegance. She wore a long, black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, and her pale skin seemed to glow under the soft light. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She was stunning, even more beautiful than he had imagined. He approached her slowly, trying not to look too eager. When she noticed him, she looked up and smiled, a small, knowing smile that sent a chill down his spine. "Late, are we?" "Celine," asked, her voice smooth and teasing. Ethan grinned and sat down opposite her. "I wouldn't keep a lady waiting, you know how it is." She raised an eyebrow. "I wouldn't call myself a lady, Ethan." He chuckled. "Fair enough. So, what's on the menu for tonight?" Celine's lips curled into a faint smile. "You'll find out soon enough." She motioned for the waiter, who quickly arrived with a bottle of red wine. She ordered with precision, her voice low and almost hypnotic. Ethan couldn't help but listen to the sound of it, as if it held some hidden power. The waiter left them alone again, and a heavy silence filled the air. Ethan leaned back in his chair watching Celine carefully. There was something about the way she carried herself, something ancient. She didn't seem like the type to be fazed by anything, but Ethan could tell she was studying him just as much as he was studying her. "You know," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "I don't know much about vampires, but I've heard some stories." Celine's eyes glinted as she looked at him, amusement dancing in her gaze. "What kind of stories?" "You know," he shrugged, trying to act casual. "The usual. Immortal beings who drink blood, live forever, and, well, you know, the usual stuff." Celine's smile remained, but her eyes darkened slightly. "Stories, hmm?" She took a sip of her wine, then leaned forward, her voice softer now. "There's always a kernel of truth in stories, Ethan. But most of them are just that, stories. What do you think is the truth?" Ethan shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling the weight of her gaze on him. There was something dangerous about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but the challenge in her eyes made him push on. "Maybe it's all true," he said, shrugging again. "Or maybe you're just a really good storyteller." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she sat there watching him. Her gaze seemed to pierce through him, making him feel like she was reading his every thought. He couldn't decide if it was thrilling or unnerving. Just then, the waiter returned, with their food. He placed the plates in front of them and left quickly, as if eager to avoid interrupting the strange tension in the air. Ethan picked up his fork, but found it hard to focus on the food. His mind was racing with thoughts of Celine. Was she really a vampire? Was this some kind of elaborate prank, or was she genuinely telling the truth? Before he could ask another question, Celine spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Ethan, what do you really want from me?" Ethan paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his heart skipped a beat. "Don't play coy," Selena said, her eyes locking onto his. "You made a wager with me, and you wanted something. But now I want to know what you really desire." What is it you seek from someone like me? Ethan could feel his pulse quicken. The words seemed loaded, like there was more to the question than just curiosity. There was something almost hypnotic in her voice, a power that he couldn't deny. He placed his fork down and looked into her eyes, unsure of how to answer. I don't know, he said, his voice unsteady. I guess I just wanted to see if I could win. Win? Selene repeated, a small smile tugging at her lips. You think this is a game? Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. Part of him still thought of it as a game, a way to prove himself, to win a bet. But another part of him, a deeper part, was starting to wonder if he had already lost. Maybe, he said quietly. Maybe I just wanted to know what it would be like to date someone like you. Selene leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving him. Someone like me, she repeated softly. And what do you think I'm like, Ethan? Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know, he admitted. But I'm starting to think I might be in over my head. Selene's smile deepened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw something darker flash in her eyes. Ethan woke up with a start, his heart racing. He blinked several times, trying to clear the fog in his mind. Where was he? He didn't remember falling asleep. His surroundings were unfamiliar. A dimly lit room with tall windows, the moonlight shining in through the glass. The air smelled strange, not quite like anything he'd ever known. Then, he felt it. A strange, sharp hunger gnawed at him. It wasn't like the hunger for food. It was something deeper, something urgent. His stomach clenched, but it wasn't hunger for a meal. It was as if something inside him had shifted, something he couldn't quite understand. He sat up, looking around, trying to gather his thoughts. His body felt different, lighter, stronger, as if every nerve was awake, every muscle more alive than it had been before. A soft voice broke through his confusion. You're awake. Ethan turned to see Selene standing in the doorway, her figure silhouetted by the moonlight. She was dressed in the same dark clothes as before, but there was something different about her too. Her eyes seemed brighter, more intense, and her presence was even more powerful than it had been. Selene? Ethan's voice sounded strange to his own ears, different, almost too loud, as if his senses had been heightened. She stepped into the room, her gaze steady on him. How do you feel? Ethan opened his mouth to speak but stopped. The words didn't come right away. Instead, he felt a strange pull deep inside him, a connection to her that he couldn't ignore. It was as if something in his very soul had been tied to hers. I feel, Ethan began, his voice shaking slightly. I feel strange. Different. Selene smiled, a knowing, almost sad smile. You're not human anymore, Ethan. Not entirely. You've been changed. Ethan stared at her, confusion filling his mind. Changed? What are you talking about? She moved closer, sitting beside him on the edge of the bed. When I bit you, I marked you. You were already mine, but now you belong to me in a way that no one else ever will. You've become something new. Ethan looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling. His skin looked normal, but it felt different, stronger, more alive. What did you do to me? He whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Selene's gaze softened. I made you like me, a vampire, but not fully. You're a hybrid, a mix of human and vampire. Ethan shook his head, trying to make sense of her words. A hybrid? That's not possible. I'm still human, right? You were, Selene said softly. But you're not anymore. Your body is still yours, but it's been altered. You'll never grow old, you'll never die, and you'll have powers you never thought possible. Ethan stood up, his legs unsteady. No, this can't be happening. I didn't ask for this. I know, Selene said, her voice gentle but firm. You didn't ask for it. But you agreed to the wager, Ethan, and this is what comes with it. He paced back and forth in the small room trying to gather his thoughts, but his mind felt like it was spinning. He couldn't focus. His senses were on overload. He could hear the faintest sound of the wind outside. He could smell the perfume of Seleni's skin, and something sweeter, deeper in the air. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You'll learn," she said simply. "It won't be easy, but you'll adapt. The transformation isn't something you can control immediately, but over time you'll get used to it." Ethan rubbed his temples, trying to stave off the headache that was building behind his eyes. "But how? How do I control this? How do I control this hunger?" Celine stood and walked to him, her presence so close that Ethan could feel the pull of her energy, a power that seemed to radiate from her. She placed a hand on his chest, and for a moment, he felt his heartbeat quicken. "The hunger will always be there," she said softly. "It's a part of what you are now. But it's not just blood you'll crave. You'll feel a need to feed on more than just sustenance. You'll feel the pull of the world around you, the emotions of others, the energy they give off." Ethan stepped back, his eyes widening. "I don't know if I can do this." Celine's expression softened, her tone becoming more comforting. "You don't have to do it alone, Ethan. I'm here to help you through it. I've been where you are now. I understand what it's like to feel lost in this new world. But you'll adjust. We both will." He looked at her, still uncertain. "So, this is forever? I'm stuck like this?" Celine nodded, her eyes glowing faintly. "Forever, yes. But that's not such a terrible thing, is it? You'll never have to grow old, you'll never be weak, and you'll have me by your side." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to wrap his mind around it all. "What if I don't want this? What if I want to go back?" Celine's expression darkened slightly. "You can't go back. This is who you are now, whether you accept it or not. But you don't have to fight it, you just have to learn to live with it." Ethan turned away from her, his mind racing. There was no going back now. He was no longer human, and part of him wondered if he ever truly had been. He looked out the window, the city below him stretching out like an endless sea of lights. His old life felt so far away, like a dream he could barely remember. "This is my new life, isn't it?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to Selene. "It is," she said. "But I'll be here, Ethan, and together we'll learn to control this new life." Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. He didn't know if he was ready, but it didn't matter. The change had already happened, and now he had to face it. Forever. Ethan stood at the window, staring out at the city below. The night had fallen completely, and the world outside seemed so far away. He was no longer part of it, not in the same way he had been before. The transformation had changed everything, and he didn't know if he was ready to accept it. He turned away from the window and looked back at Celine. She was sitting on the couch, her legs crossed and her hands resting lightly on her lap. She seemed calm, almost detached, as if nothing in the world could shake her. Ethan had 1,000 questions, but they all seemed to get stuck in his throat. What had happened to him? How was he supposed to live like this? Was there a way out? Celine's eyes met his as if she had read his thoughts. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a soft understanding in her gaze. "You're struggling," she said softly. Ethan shook his head, rubbing his temples. "You have no idea how strange this feels," he muttered. "I can't even think straight. My body, it's like it belongs to someone else. It's like I'm losing control of everything." Celine didn't move. She simply watched him, her eyes never leaving his face. After a moment, she stood up slowly and walked toward him, her steps silent. "You're not losing control," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "This is who you are now. You just need to learn to accept it." Ethan turned away from her, looking out at the city again. "I don't want this, Selene. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for any of it." She stood behind him, her presence heavy in the air. No, you didn't ask, but you agreed, and now you have to face the consequences. He clenched his fists. I didn't know what I was agreeing to, he snapped. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't know you were going to change me like this. Celine was silent for a moment. Then her voice softened, almost as if she were speaking to herself. I never wanted to change you, Ethan. Not in the way you think. But the moment I bit you, you were mine. And I didn't know how else to bring you into my world. Ethan turned around sharply, his eyes wide with surprise. What do you mean? You knew this would happen, didn't you? She met his gaze steadily, her eyes betraying a hint of something like sadness. No, Ethan. I didn't know. I've lived for centuries. I've seen hundreds, thousands of people come and go. But you're different. You were never supposed to be a part of this world. Ethan took a step back, his mind racing. What are you talking about? Why am I different? Celine didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to a nearby shelf and pulled out a small old book. She opened it carefully, flipping through the pages. It was ancient, the pages yellowed, with age. She found the page she was looking for and handed it to him. Ethan looked at the page, but the writing was in a language he didn't understand. It looked old, almost like a script from a time long gone. Celine, he began. What is this? She leaned in, her fingers gently tracing the ancient letters. This is my history, Ethan. The story of my past. The story of how I became what I am. Ethan frowned, confused. Why are you showing me this? Celine's eyes darkened, a shadow passing over her expression. Because, Ethan, you are not the first human I have ever brought into my world. You are the first one who has ever changed the way you did. You are the first one to survive it. Ethan looked up at her, his confusion growing. What do you mean, survive? She let out a soft sigh and sat back down on the couch, her fingers still, brushing the pages of the old book. I was once like you, just a human, long before I was changed. I lived an ordinary life until I met him. Who? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Celine's eyes seemed to drift into the past. The one who made me what I am. An ancient vampire who had the power to transform anyone into a creature like himself. He was powerful, ruthless, and he wanted me to be his mate, his partner in immortality. Ethan took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. And you accepted? Celine's face darkened. I didn't have a choice. I was young and I thought I could escape. But I couldn't. He changed me. Made me into what I am now, and for a long time I hated him for it. Ethan see the pain in her eyes now. The quiet of the night was shattered by a sudden knock at the door. Ethan sat up in bed, his senses instantly on alert. He wasn't sure why, but the feeling in the air was different. He could feel it, a strange tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His enhanced senses were more attuned than ever, and tonight they were screaming at him. He heard Celine's footsteps approaching, slow and steady, but with a purpose. He looked at her as she stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. It's them, she said, her voice soft but laced with a quiet warning. They've found us. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who? The ones who want you dead, Selina replied, her eyes narrowing. She walked into the room, her movements calm but with a certain intensity. My past has come back to haunt us, Ethan. Ethan stood up, his feet barely touching the ground. He felt a strange surge of power through his body. Strength he didn't know he had. His mind raced. Who could possibly want him dead? He hadn't even been a vampire for long enough to make enemies, had he? I thought you were done with your past, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. He didn't like the look in her eyes, the coldness that had replaced the warmth that had been there just hours before. Selina looked at him, her eyes hard. I was, but the truth is my past is far from over. There are people who won't let me go, and now they know about you, about what you are. Ethan swallowed hard. You said we were safe. I thought we were safe. We are, Selina replied, her voice low and firm. But only if we fight. They won't stop until they have what they want. He frowned, confusion clouding his thoughts. What do they want with me? I'm just a human. Celine shook her head, her gaze hardening. You were a human. You're not anymore. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had always known deep down that his life had changed in ways he couldn't control, but hearing it from her made it all too real. They want you because of what you are now, she continued, her eyes never leaving his. They want to control you, use you for their own gain. Vampires like them, old ones, powerful ones, they don't like change. And you are a change they didn't see coming. Ethan's mind spun. This wasn't just about him being with Celine. This was bigger. Something far darker than a simple wager had been set in motion. I didn't ask for this, he said, his voice low, filled with frustration. I know you didn't, Celine replied, her tone softening for a moment. But now, you're tied to me. And that makes you a target. Ethan didn't know what to say. The more he learned, the less he understood. A part of him wanted to run, to find a way out of this nightmare, but there was another part of him that knew that escape wasn't an option. Not anymore. Before he could respond, there was another knock on the door, more forceful this time. Ethan's heart raced as he glanced at Celine, who had already moved toward the door. Stay behind me, she said, her voice sharp. Whatever happens, don't step in the way. These people are not like anything you've faced before. Ethan nodded, a surge of fear rushing through him. He had no idea what he was up against, but if Celine was worried, then that meant things were about to get very dangerous. Celine opened the door just a crack, her eyes narrowing as she peered into the hallway. Ethan could hear the faint sound of movement, of something or someone standing just outside. Celine, a voice called, low and menacing. It sent a chill down Ethan's spine. We know you're in there. Come out, and let's make this easy. Ethan's eyes widened as he heard the voice. It was rough, deep, but there was something chillingly familiar about it. The voice spoke again. We're not here to hurt you, but we will if we must. Celine didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped into the hallway, her face hard as stone. You've made a mistake. I don't have anything for you. The door slammed open and two tall figures stepped into the room, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The first man was huge, with broad shoulders and a grim expression. His eyes were an eerie shade of red. The second one was slightly shorter but equally imposing, with a cruel smile on his face. Both of them looked like they had seen countless battles and survived them all. Ethan instinctively stepped back, his heart hammering in his chest. These were no ordinary vampires. These were the kind of monsters Celine had warned him about, the ones who could tear through anything in their path without breaking a sweat. Celine didn't back down. You should have stayed away, she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet rage. The tall man grinned, showing off his sharp fangs. We don't leave loose ends, Celine. You can't just disappear, and you certainly can't take someone like him with you. Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He didn't know what was happening, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Celine wasn't just fighting for herself now, she was fighting for him. He stepped forward, despite the fear gnawing at him. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice shaky but determined. What do you want with me? The shorter man chuckled darkly. You're the change boy, the future, and we want to make sure you're on the right side of history. Celine stepped between them, her eyes flashing with fury. He's not your tool to control, and neither am I. The room seemed to grow colder as the two strangers locked eyes with her. Ethan could feel the power between them, the ancient strength that seemed to pulse from their every move. He was caught in the middle with no idea how to escape. Then you'll die for it, the tall man said, his voice cold. Ethan felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The game had changed. And now he was in it whether he wanted to be or not. The tension in the room was unbearable. The two powerful vampires stood in front of Ethan and Celine, their eyes burning with a dangerous intensity. Every breath Ethan Took felt like a weight on his chest, his senses screaming at him to do something, anything, but he had no idea what. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't even fully understood what had happened to him, and now here they were in the middle of a fight that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Selene stood in front of him, her posture unwavering, as if she had been here 1,000 times before. Her eyes were dark with anger, but there was also something else. Something that told Ethan she was about to unleash everything she had. "We don't want to fight," the taller of the two vampires said, his voice low and threatening. "But if you're going to protect him, Selene, we'll make sure you regret it." Selene's voice was icy, her tone carrying the weight of centuries of pain. "You think I care about your threats? You've never understood, have you? I don't run from things anymore, not from you, not from anyone." Ethan watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt small, useless, like he was just a spectator in a world he didn't belong in. But there was something in Selene's voice, something in the way she stood her ground that made him believe she wasn't just saying these things for show. She was ready to fight, ready to protect him. A moment of silence passed before the shorter vampire spoke again. "You were a fool to think you could escape your past, Selene, and now you've dragged him into it." Ethan's eyes flicked between the two vampires, his mind racing. They wanted him. They wanted to use him. But Selene had never given in to anyone. He could see that now, clearly. "No one owns me," Selene said, her voice calm but full of steel. "Not anymore. I made that choice long ago." With that, she moved, quick as a shadow, her speed so sudden that Ethan barely had time to react. She struck the shorter vampire with a brutal punch, sending him stumbling backward. The sound of his body crashing against the wall was deafening, but Selene didn't hesitate. She was already on him, her claws out, her strength unmatched. Ethan could see the fury in her eyes, the centuries of pain, the power that had built up over time, and the desire to protect what was hers. The tall vampire rushed at Selene, but she was ready. She twisted, her movements graceful but deadly, and in an instant she had him pinned to the ground. Ethan had never seen anything like it. She was unstoppable, a force of nature. The fight between them was fierce, each vampire using their strength and speed to their advantage. Ethan stood frozen, unable to move, watching as Selene fought to protect him. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be bound to someone, what it meant to truly be hers. She wasn't just a vampire. She was a warrior, someone who had fought for everything she had, and now she was fighting for him. The tall vampire managed to break free from Selene's grip, but before he could strike, Ethan did something he didn't think he was capable of. He stepped forward, instinct driving him. His body moved before. His mind could catch up, and in that moment he felt the power surging through him, the new strength that came with his transformation. His senses sharpened, his muscles pulsed with energy, and without thinking he lunged at the tall vampire. Surprised, the vampire barely had time to react as Ethan tackled him to the ground. The force of the impact sent them both tumbling, but Ethan held on, his hands gripping the vampire's arms with unnatural strength. For the first time he felt like he wasn't just a human. He wasn't powerless anymore. Selene paused for a brief second, watching Ethan with a mixture of surprise and pride. Then, without missing a beat, she finished off the second vampire with a swift blow, her claws ripping through the air and striking him down. The room fell silent as the two vampires lay defeated, their bodies crumpled on the floor. "Pito,"